Okay guys, sorry this is crooked, but anyway, this is a quick intro or recap of what we did yesterday with the Edgenuity lesson. So remember, your cell membrane, instead of the definition being, oh, it just allows things in and out, it maintains homeostasis, your happy, healthy state. How does it do it? By always making sure the extracellular and intracellular environment is stable or even equal. Okay, so you have your yellow lipids, so remember your cell membrane is made of lipids, but then we also learned that you have protein channels that help too. Now, I broke this down into small, medium, and large molecules. So in general, if something is like 1 or 2 molecules big, so for example like O2, 2 molecules, H2O, 3, little things, they just freely cross the membrane. They just freely cross the membrane, okay? Things that are medium, they a lot of times need to use a protein channel, okay, because they cannot just bust through the membrane, okay? And large things, we're gonna learn maybe next week, that they have to be engulfed. This is called endocytosis. Okay, and the same goes for coming out. Small molecules can freely go in and out. Medium may need a protein channel, and then we can exit or exocytose, expel large molecules. Okay. The other thing that you have to take into consideration is what is the concentration, like how many particles are inside to outside, because remember you want it to be equal. So for example, if you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blue, whatever we want to call these, CO2 molecules, or whatever they are, there's obviously a higher concentration outside than inside. So since these particles can just diffuse through the membrane, enough want to diffuse to where it's an even concentration. So how many would diffuse? 1, 2, 3, and you have a 3:3 ratio. Good. Okay, say if this was it, then it would be as close as possible. Okay, now it gets trickier the bigger the molecules you have. Okay, so say if you have, we'll just say 2 of these larger, we'll say glucose molecules. Okay, there's a higher concentration outside to inside, so the going with the flow, you're going to want to come into this cell. So you do not use energy because it's going with the flow. It's going from a crowded room to a least crowded room. So that glucose will find a protein channel and go through. This protein channel is going to help it. This is called facilitated diffusion. Facilitate means to help. So it's not helping as it using energy, it's helping as it is the tunnel that helps it through. So it's not using energy, because do you need to use energy to go into a less crowded room? No. So that glucose is going to find a channel, come in, and now you're at a 1-to-1 equal ratio, okay? Now, say if you have 2 on the outside and 1 on the inside. If you want to pump this glucose out, if you want to pump it outside into the crowded space, now you have to use ATP energy. So now you're going to use energy and go against the gradient and pump it out. So you're going to pump it out into that crowd, okay? And then always, when you're endocytosing large molecules or exocytosing them, you're using a lot of energy to move that membrane. So when you're talking about passive transport, things that do not involve energy, that's just going with the flow. When you're going from a high concentration into a low, into a less crowded room, that's a simple diffusion of small molecules. Water is always passive, okay? Active transport, this is using energy. This is when you're going into a crowded space, going against the gradient, and this would be endocytosis and exocytosis. Okay, so now we'll get to the worksheet. I'm gonna move us over. Oh no. Yay, my mug didn't fall though. Okay, so you're gonna fill in as we go. This is all in regards to the video we watched yesterday. If you didn't watch it, stop and watch yesterday's video. Okay, like I said, my notes would be way better than Edgenuity, but we're gonna try to stick with Edgenuity in case we would need to be quarantined again. Okay, these aren't the worst notes, but they're not as good as what I would give you, so we're gonna fill these in and then I'm gonna add to them. Okay. Okay, first slide. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to explain how cells maintain homeostasis, their happy, healthy state, differentiate between diffusion and osmosis, passive transport and active, describe the importance of homeostasis in living organisms, and generate procedures to utilize charge graphs and able to show data. Okay, we want to talk about diffusion. Simple diffusion doesn't use energy. Remember, particles diffuse. Osmosis is a special word that talks about when water diffuses. Okay, passive transport does not use energy. Active, like you're active, uses energy. Okay, here's some vocab. We're going to go over them. I'm just going to let you fill it in. Diffusion, movement of particles from high concentration and then they diffuse to a lower concentration. Active transport needs energy. Remember what kind of energy? ATP energy. Uses energy to move particles against, or remember, let's go into a crowded room. Passive, cells diffusing, no energy needed. And that's usually going from a high concentration to a low concentration. It's going with the flow. Last but not least, diffusion. When you diffuse, okay, I thought this was just up there. Yeah, they have diffusion and active. Huh. Weird. Okay. So fill this in. How does a cell maintain homeostasis? Let's talk about it. These are examples. I'm not going to hit on these because this isn't the most important stuff, but homeostasis, remember this is the happy, healthy state of maintaining a stable internal environment despite the changes in the external. So that's like you being healthy and happy despite what goes on around you. If we're in the middle of a heat wave, you're not going to be heating up to 110 degrees like your outer external environment, okay? You are going to be doing things to maintain a stable internal environment, okay? So homeostasis is just how you're adapting, how you're staying happy, healthy, safe, okay? For example, oxygen and carbon dioxide concentrations can be maintained, like you always have to maintain a balance between those. Your pH, always have to maintain a balance. Nutrient and waste concentrations, always maintain a balance. Salt and electrolytes, that's why sometimes you do need to drink things like Gatorade or even drink things that are a little bit salty. And then volume and pressure of extracellular fluids. All of these are examples of things that need to always be in check, okay? That's why people take blood pressure medication. They take things for their thyroids. They take insulin for diabetes. They're all trying to figure out how to maintain homeostasis for all of these. Okay, so diffusion, remember you diffuse like a diffuser. You're going from a high concentration and then you go into a low concentration. Okay, diffusion in cells is the movement of particles from high concentration to low concentration. You're not fighting your way into high concentration, you're going into low concentration, okay? So you're going with the concentration gradient. You're not going against it, you're going with it, okay? The molecules are evenly spaced, they're nice and spaced out, they've reached an equilibrium, and there's no difference in concentration. Everything is equal and everything gets its own space. Okay? Now up here, Okay, it says, circle the section of the diagram in which dynamic equilibrium has been reached. Equal, things become equal. So obviously, external compared to internal, high concentration, low concentration, they are not equal. High concentration, low concentration, as you can see, things are diffusing across the membrane. Now, based on what I showed you earlier, that might be because these particles are very small, or they're going into the less crowded space. They're going with the gradient. They're going with the flow, okay? This is obviously equal. If you want to check yourself, count the particles here, count the particles here. It should be even particles per space, particles per space. If there's different amounts of space, just make sure that pattern looks even. Do they look evenly spaced? Okay, osmosis. This is a special vocab word that talks about what happens to water when it spaces out. When water diffuses, that special vocab word is osmosis. Think of Osmosis Jones from the movie, okay? In cells, the diffusion of water from an area of high water concentration to low water. So basically, I always say water goes to the party. Okay, water always shows up to the party. What you always want to do is you want to say, okay, where is there a lot of particles? That's where water wants to go. Nobody wants to be full of things like salt or sugar. So what happens is water in your body dilutes it out. And if you ever think about like your parents, they may buy things that are low sodium, or they may say, hey, don't eat all that salt or sugar. It's because when you eat salt or sugar, you retain water and you bloat. So water always kind of goes to the salt and sugar. So osmosis is the movement of water towards the particles to dilute it, okay? Hypo, like a hippo, remember it's going to swell. This is when water, and I'm going to add this to it. Okay, I got it. Hypo, so we're going to write hippo. This is where water enters. And when it enters, it's going to swell. How do you get to be a big old hippo? Water has to come in and it's going to swell. Well, why is water coming in? Because you got a lot of particles inside. Okay? Hyper. So when you're hyper, you're going to get skinny. Okay? So this is where water leaves. And you are going to shrivel or shrink. And when you think about why do you do that? Well, if you're going to release water, it means that there's more particles outside of the cell, and it's releasing water to the particles, okay? And last but not least, isotonic. Remember, iso means same, isosceles triangle, same sides. So this is where you have the same concentration, and it's in homeostasis. Nothing happens. Or, I'm going to take that back. So this is homeostasis. Okay, this is where whatever water goes in, the same amount of water goes out. So whatever water goes in, the same goes out. You have a complete balance. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, here we're getting to the good stuff. So ready? What would make a cell shrivel? Well, water has to leave it. So what you need to picture is when there's a whole bunch of particles, and draw these, a whole bunch of particles outside, water's going to go to the party. So this is where there's more of a concentration. So this would be an example of like 10 particles to 2. Okay, water's going to leave and try to dilute the 10 particles. Now when it's isotonic, same. This is where if there's 2 particles on the outside, there's 2 particles on the inside, any water that leaves is going to come back in. Okay, and hypo, why would you swell up like a hippo? You're full of particles. So this is like if there was, I'll write 6 particles on the inside, but only 2 particles on the outside. So the water's going to come in because that's where that party is. Okay. So you know how the water, you know where the water is going to go based on the amount of particles on the internal or external or intracellular or extracellular side of the cell. Okay, so passive transport, first thing I see when I see passive transport, passive is no energy, write that down. Remember, when somebody is passive, they're just laid back, they're just chill, okay, no energy. So, why do things not use energy? Well, when they're going with the flow or when they're really small, okay. Passive transport in cells is the process of moving particles without energy from an area of high concentration to low. So what they're saying is, for example, say if you have a beaker and it's filled with water, and I put a particle, or I'm sorry, a drop of dye, okay? We'll say it's blue food coloring, so, okay. So blue food coloring. What this right here is an area of high concentration, and it wants to spread out to an area of low particle concentration. So you're going from high particle to low particles. You diffuse, okay? Maintaining homeostasis with active transport, active, we're gonna write with energy, okay? Active transport cells use energy when you're going against the concentration gradient from an area of low concentration to a high. So this is an example, okay? If you have a bunch of particles on the inside, picture this like a packed classroom. And you got few on the outside. The normal progression is some of these want to come out and even out the load of the class sizes. But if you want to go into that crowded classroom against the gradient, from low to high concentration, you need to use ATP energy. That's what going from low to high means. You're going against the gradient. So they do say you go against the gradient. Okay, make sure you write these and draw these. Okay, here's some extra notes. So, particles being moved into the cell must attach to a carrier protein. The chemical energy from the cell is used to change the shape of the protein to allow the particles to be moved to the other side. The protein is then returned to its original shape. All that is saying is, when you have a cell, when you have a cell and it has a protein tunnel, what they're saying is when ATP is used to push that molecule through, sometimes it has to change the shape of the tunnel, and the energy, the ATP energy, needs to like open the protein tunnel and then close it back to its original shape. So all they're saying is sometimes you have to attach to a carrier protein. Sometimes well, all the time, you got to use your ATP energy, and sometimes it changes the shape and then returns back to its original shape. Homeostasis, so this is talking about when we were talking about, I think, the polar bears and the kangaroos. So homeostasis in living organisms, so this is basically how we adapt to live. So like whatever's thrown at us in our environment, we adapt, okay, to maintain homeostasis. So all living organisms must maintain homeostasis to survive. Polar bears must maintain a body temperature against the extreme cold. Kangaroo rats must maintain a suitable body temperature in the hot desert. So those were our two examples from the video yesterday, where on a cellular level, and then on a tissue level, and an organ level, and an organ system level, and an organism level, everything worked together to make these changes. The kangaroo rat produces only a few droplets of urine, which go through its kidneys, which is the organ, and then through the organ system, to prevent from water loss. And then the polar bear, they said used as few ATP possible. That's why polar bears always kind of walk really slow. They're never just running around with energy, is they know they have to maintain their ATP and not use any that they don't absolutely need to. Okay, in the terms of what's a paramecium, so now we're getting to a real live organism. Okay, paramecium kind of looks like this. Has a bunch of cilia, but I'm not going to draw a million cilia, but has a whole bunch of cilia, and it is eukaryotic. It does have a nucleus somewhere, but it has a whole bunch of vacuoles. Stores waste, water, food. Okay, water enters paramecium cells through osmosis. Osmosis is the movement of water. The contractile vacuole pumps water out of the cell to maintain homeostasis within the cell. When the paramecium placed in a hypertonic solution, the concentration of the vacuole decreased. So what they're saying is, you always have to count the amount of salts or particles, and that's where what's going to happen to the vacuole. So I am only going to draw one vacuole for now. Okay, so here's our one vacuole. Okay, so say if there is 1, 2, 3 particles on the outside, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 particles on the inside. Water goes to the party, water moves to the particles, so I put a star, this is where the water is going to go. So water is going to come into the vacuole, and the vacuole is going to get larger, okay? Let's do the reverse. So the paramecium in itself will get bigger. Okay, if there are 3 particles on the outside and only 1, this is the greater concentration, so water will actually leave the vacuole and leave the paramecium. The paramecium may get smaller, okay? All based on the properties of osmosis. Water goes to the party, water goes to the particles. I'm going to have you draw this label this right here, and then we're going to draw the 2 scenarios. So draw that one, and then I'm going to draw another one. Here's your nucleus, here's your vacuole, and then I'm going to draw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. Water is going to go into the vacuole. So this is going to be hypo, because when the water comes in, it's going to make it bigger. Swell. This is going to be hyper, because it's going to shrink when it loses the water. Okay, so I do want you to draw these 2 paramecium in the 2 situations. Pause this, I'm going to move on, but I do want you to draw these. Okay, the graphs on the other pages, I'm just going to have you fill them in. This is not important to me. This is important to Edgenuity, but it's not necessarily important to me. Or if I can make another copy, I'm actually gonna not include these last couple, that graph, okay, and also this fill-in question. Okay, so here's our homeostasis review. I do like this. Homeostasis, happy, healthy state, maintaining stable conditions. Cells maintain a stable internal environment despite the changing external conditions. The cell membrane controls what enters and leaves the cell. Cells maintain homeostasis through the process of osmosis diffusion, passive and active transport. So, diffusion of particles, osmosis of water, passive, not using energy to do this, or active, using energy to do this. Last but not least, the vocab words that you need to know. Diffusion, movement of particles with the concentration gradient from high to low. Osmosis, movement of water. Water's a really small room, it can just go in and out through the membrane. Passive does not use energy, without energy. Active, with energy, and you always go against. You're going against the crowd. Last but not least, we're almost there, guys. Last page you don't have to do if I have it, but then here we're almost done. Okay, last but not least, organisms must maintain homeostasis to survive. Proper body system functioning is dependent on homeostasis. Remember, when there is something wrong with you, when you have a fever, when it hurts when you pee, when you have diabetes, when you're gaining a whole bunch of weight at one time, when you're not in homeostasis, stuff goes wrong. You go to the doctor, they figure out what's wrong, they help you balance it out, okay? So that's why it's so important to learn about homeostasis, because every cell needs to maintain it, otherwise they die. Okay.